Welcome to TradeTheNBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 14th of October, and Friday again we saw beautiful range. We came all the way back up to the EBM yellow, all the way up here at the lovely 2990 range, which means we're likely to get back into the 3000, which will put us back up at the peaks of it. We've had this steady rise of the DOC red. It was a little bit suspect with the steel, still coming from above, not having reset, but what we ended up with was green moving above cyan over here a few days back, and that was enough to really give it the support needed. And again, we talked about this back at the time. Once we were above that 50%, being long biased was the way to go, and sure enough, we almost have cyan under red. Ticked up a little bit here. We'll see if it's able to maintain itself, because as soon as we start to see move of both the midterm and short-term buyers, being the steel and green coming back towards red, we'll probably see a little bit more weakness come out of it. But you get the positive things. The trade deal, even if it's the initial stages with China, means that, added tariffs aren't going to be way down. But again, this, where people were really confused, it was always a negotiation tactic. It was never meant to be something that was going to be sustained. You just had to force the Chinese to do something other than just, run roughshod over, basically our trade policy in general. From an NQ standpoint, slightly better here in that you're above the 61% range already, getting close to these pre-peak levels here, which were slightly lower than, relatively speaking, than the S&P was, but also presenting the exact same configuration there. A little bit more separation, though, of shorts to long-term buyers, but they're moving into the negative 7.5 with the DOC red, so that takes out this previous peak over here, and that gives it a little bit more strength. So, but it also gives us a great marker, because as soon as you roll back below that, then you're likely to see a bit more pullback. And we're probably going to see a little more consolidation in here this week. You've got quite a few little side things happening in between politically. Of course, it looks like the impeachment situation is falling apart now that even the whistleblower thing's not going to testify. So that whole milieu of, confused situations really is probably not really impacting the market so much unless there's a new revelation. So with all that kind of behind, people are sort of discounting the likelihood of there being any major political upheaval. The big upheaval, though, is with Europe. And that really comes down to positive news for Brit exit. Certainly has bolstered it quite a bit coming off the lows, because it was getting pretty precarious, but we ended up with the reset. Green moved above, midterm buyers got above shorts there, then crossed back, but in really strong rising red DOC. That's been enough to hold it. Not enough to break the 50% at this particular point. So it becomes critical here, because again, like looking at the S&P and the NASDAQ, you've broken past this previous high threshold back over here, which happened at the beginning of September. So it's got to maintain that. And again, without the reset, this has really been a strong push of big players driving this higher. So we'll see if that Brit exit stays on track for a deal, which would certainly, I think, cause a significant break and maybe even move back towards the highs up here, at least in the 112 range, which is what they're hoping for. Because if it doesn't happen, then the euro is certainly going to be breaking down much more. So that's going to be the lead indicator right there on that. From an oil standpoint, maintaining, kept the lows, so that was important to survive within that range, which just means that there's still the prospect of decent economic growth. Otherwise, we're not looking at a situation where it's breaking down to the point where oversupply is really destroying things. And so the whole Saudi Arabia thing and that fluke over here really turning out to be not so much of anything. And gold, that's going to keep it in check, relatively speaking, and we kind of expected it to be right in this range where it dipped below the red line, so we knew that it had to visit. Now we've dipped below again here on the extremes, meaning even if we pop back here, we're still going to be coming back to retest that low area, and so it's sort of holding in that consolidation pattern for now. From an intraday standpoint, well, we were just continuing Thursday's move going forward. We had just, and this is the exact reverse of what we talked about with the reset below red, but from a long side where the steel stays below and continues, and that you can see happened all the way through until right here was the first peak move above. Still had significant sign, but it was the first indication that the broader sense of the rally had ended, and that kind of gave a clarity. And so once we did get a DOC with the below the negative 13.5, that was a subject enough for a reasonable move, but when it came back above and redid it again, that was an even clearer move, and it was just a fraction lower than the previous one, and that led to softening. It took us all the way back to a 0% off of rising Morganacci, so we knew that the low was going to come meet that. And so if we slide forward, it was a busy day. Came down, that produced new buy signals that took place through there. We did have this dip below the red line, though, that needed to be resolved. And you can see this came all the way across, and it just stops after X bars. I'm not sure if I've made that a variable yet, but I will double check that because that'll allow you to adjust it. But we knew that was where the target range being 100%, and it gives you like the 80% move of it right there. That's why it's slightly above it, and that was the expectation that we would come back and hit that. So it's just a matter of waiting for strong configuration where not just getting a DOC spread configuration, but one where you have that strong orange spiking above, steel coming across, green moving below red. Still pop back up to the 100% range in there, and then again right here where you had the crossover. And it all kind of converged right at that same, it turns out to be an identical spot, and that led to the full. So that was a really nice move coming back all the way down, and we ended up with the spike coming below. You know it's going to be a little bit weak, so you're not expecting a huge run out of it because of the failure of the steel to reset. So sure enough, it was kind of choppy back and forth. Still popped up, got up to the 50%, faded, then the reset came. So we finally have that reset in place, still within weak configuration at this particular point, but we're right back at these same numbers, 2977, 71 for the ranges in between, and we produced some new ones in between. We got 94 up here as the peak level from, well, way back. So all in all, really good stuff. The action's been really good, and I think that we're likely to see probably a little bit more narrowing of the range now that some things have worked out. But that high volatility certainly kept things interesting, and I don't know that it's necessarily over. I think we just might have a pause in it for a brief period of time unless something new happens, and there's always new, so we'll keep an eye out for it. From a 50K standpoint, I think, too, it was worth noting, coming off of the sell signal that took place there, you also, again, have the steel rising above, sort of ending that broader long push. So we may start to see a little softening, a complete reset of the shakeout. So if we start to get back to the highs and we're producing much lower shakeout, then I think that we might get a little bit more retrace that. We've got positive extremes that were up here that have already been filled, and then by the time you go back to all the way over here, that gives you the broad range all the way back to the low 2925 range. So keep that one in the back of your mind when we start to get a signal that indicates a significant softness. That's the long and the short of it for now. As always, though, trade well. We'll talk to you later.